Okay, so in this video, we're going to take this scene, which we've worked on in previous videos in terms of creating a cutscene, and take that. Let me see if I can actually play through the cutscene for you. So we've got, here, we'll do it in partial game mode too. So in the previous videos, we went through the process of constructing this game cutscene that transitions into actual third-person gameplay mode. So we've got a camera pan, walking bender. I've gone and modified the animation using a different version of a walk cycle. And then it cuts through this, the bus goes by, and it cuts to gameplay in the third-person mode. So what I want to talk about in this video is taking this third-person mode and actually adding other objects of gameplay to create a game prototype in about the simplest fashion you can do using these same timeline structures and some scripting, which I'll post the links to the scripts in the comments. What I'm going to do is I don't want to modify this cutscene that I've already done. I want to make a new one, but I want to modify the new one from this. So one of the things I'll do is I'll go to show and explore. That opens this. Then I can copy the scene there and paste and give it a new name, and we'll call this game prototype scene. And then when we come back here, it'll show up, game prototype shows up as a new scene. Double click on that. Here is our scene. So we'll go to F. So now we've got all the stuff that we set up in the previous scenes. What we need to add is, in this case, we'll add some zombies coming around the corners. We'll set this up as a bunch of collisions so they can find their way in the gaps, and but not go through buildings. And then what we'll do is we'll set up a climb up to a height for safety, maybe here, or yeah, maybe here, with a goal like to get here. And the idea is, like, based on everything that we've showed so far, when we get to the end of the timeline and the gameplay actually starts, we could continue the timeline to a different camera that might like show cuts of the zombies coming from different directions, and then actually cut to a shot of like our goal destination, like some way to get out of this place. And the idea is that we have to then go and find that place in the scene and get there without being attacked by the zombies. So what we'll probably do is add some sort of like ladder fall or some sort of zigzag, drop a plank down to here so that we can then crawl up it and get to the top. And the advantage then is if we do that, because that plank, that thing that we're animating in a timeline, is not calculated with our Navmesh, it will not be navigable by the zombies, even if they can go up 40-degree angles or whatever, because it hasn't been calculated to be. It's dynamic, and if it moves, it can't be static, so you won't be able to calculate a Navmesh on it, and therefore your AI won't be able to go up it. All right, so let's start. First thing we'll want to do is add some zombies in. So let's take our... By the way, I built this stuff with the standard assets. The standard assets in the asset store, if you look them up, now have been deprecated. So what I'll do is I will back up the scripts and the third-person controller that I'm using from the standard assets, just that part, and put it up on a GitHub so you can get it in the comments. But if you look it up, there's no Unity standard assets anymore because they've deprecated it as of April 1st. I thought it was a joke at first, but they'd been talking about it for a while. The thing is, we don't really need it. It's just because it's not being supported anymore. but we do have certain scripts that I've used in these scripts, so in this scene, so I'm going to keep those alive on a GitHub. All right, so and really any humanoid character would work. The main thing I'm interested in is just wanted some prefab third-person AI character to use for this. So in our prefabs from, actually we have a zombie if we wanted to use that instead. I forgot that I'd gone and downloaded some zombies. But, so if we pull him out, let's see. This is another asset from the Unity store. So if we did that, we could use, he's got this zombie controller, but we could use instead, just copy over. Yeah, let's do that just to make it a little different. I don't know what the difference between these three are. Except that maybe you can tear them to pieces. So we'll go with this guy. I'm going to lose this controller for now. Actually, I'll do the third person. We'll get there in a sec. What we'll do is we'll copy in the standard assets the prefabs. I want this AI third person here. And I'm just going to copy his parts across. So I'll copy the rigid body, which technically he may not even need. I'm not sure. It may be that his AI controller uses that. Then we'll paste it here. Paste component is new. Take the capsule collider. Paste component is new. And Navmesh agent. Copy. So you can see the capsule collider is its own thing, and when I paste this Navmesh agent, that's what adds this collision width for the target. So there's the Navmesh agent, and then we need our AI character control. Yep. And that adds our third-person character script as well. So let's just check this guy. He's using the third-person animator controller. So this, which means this guy's going to walk in a human way instead of a zombie way. If you wanted to modify that, you've got to go into that controller. You'd have to make a different controller. So I've gone and taken the third-person animator controller and made this zombie third-person animator controller, but right now it's still using the same animations. I just copied this one and made a copy of it. If you look at that, what you'd basically do to get this to work, to make it more zombie-like, is go in and create animations like these for all of the zombie moves out of zombie. You can get the zombie animations out of the mocap that's on Unity, or download a zombie pack that has them. And I think this zombie pack does. So you've got attack, falling, idle, run, run in place, walk, walk one, walk two. Walk in place. So that's it. But they don't have these left and right turn ones. All these is just the character standing in place and turning. And you can find examples of that in any of the mocap that's on Unity, especially that huge mocap library. So that's turn. So it's just, these are just turning animations. Humanoid walk. That. So to be honest, we could probably replace some of these. So this humanoid idle, we could replace with zombie idle. Let's see. Or is there a zombie idle? So it's just him with his arms out, and then there's zombie walk idle. And that's just standing still, but so we can use this zombie idle. Or is it Z idle? Yeah, Z idle. And then leave the quarter turns, then the zombie walk. What's a zombie walk? Or humanoid walk? Right sharp. Okay, so we can keep all that, but we can replace the humanoid walk with zombie walk, Z walk. Let's figure out which one we want to use. Go back to the zombie animation. So there's Z walk with his arms out, walk with arms down. I think Z walk with the arms out. It looks more zombie-like. So go back to our blend tree. It's the Z walk. Yep. And then the Z humanoid run would be zombie run. Let's check that. So select here, go to humanoid run and replace with Z run. That should do it. So it gives him, he's got these humanoid turns, but then zombie walk and run, and that's probably going to look okay because it'll blend between, and those blends are so simplistic that it should work. So now if we go back to our game and the inspector for him, we're using the zombie third-person animator controller, which we just modified. We've got his collider. Just checking everything. The Navmesh agent we're going to have to work on, but it's going to be this humanoid. We can keep the steering that we had from this guy where we'd set it originally, the speed and stuff, just to see how it performs. We may end up changing that based on these new animations. And that should work. Oh, the target for the AI character control will end up being in our scene vendor. And we'll see if that's the right target when we get there. All right, so we can lose this guy now. Okay, we'll leave him here just so we can test him, keep him close by, and we'll do a playthrough in a sec. But before we can get him to walk, we have to have our mesh baked for our navigation. So let's go to our navigation, look at our objects, select one. So it's standard, it's walkable. Probably everything in here is walkable right now. But for the buildings, we want those to be not walkable, just so that we can make it so that the zombies will go in between. So let's select all of these buildings. I'm not going to go to the trouble of boxing out this. Normally when you create a scene like this, you'll have crashed barricades or something so people don't navigate off the map or out of zones that you don't want them to on the map. I'm just going to leave it for now. I think you guys are smart enough to understand that you're going to have to do that. So we'll say not walkable for all the buildings, and everything else should be walkable. All right, let's bake it and see what happens. So if we bake, it's going and think, well, we haven't started yet. We'll leave everything the same for the agents. It's baking. So now we can look at our baked map, and you can see that it's created a Navmesh. Why it did this, I have no idea. Sometimes these things are a little weird, but that's not going to be a huge problem. There's just a gap there for some reason. Why, I don't know. But you can see for the most part it's done a good job of creating this nav mesh. This, don't worry about this. The nav mesh is still there. It's just allowing the height of it is a little bit lower. It's just, this is going to keep the zombies walking in the places we want them to be able to walk. Looks good. All right, so we'll leave that and go back to our inspector. Save project. All right, so for now, the main thing is we want to be able to play through our cutscene and then get to this zombie and see if he moves towards us. We haven't got any kind of thing that'll happen if he does get to us yet, but we'll add that in a sec. But for now, instead of playing through this entire timeline, which takes a fair amount of time, I'm going to set the initial time to, let me get to the loaded up here. I want to set it to like 45 seconds. It looks like for the timeline instead of playing through the whole thing. So we'll go, let's just make it 40 so we get a little bit of an intro. All right, so now play it. So it'll pick 40 seconds up into that timeline, waiting. And then we're in gameplay mode. There's our zombie. He's not animating, probably because he may not be set up yet, but he's moving towards us at least, slowly, which is probably a good thing. Except that he goes by. So it's actually moving towards a different blender. So we targeted the wrong blender. It's the one that we turned off. You'll see him stop there. Yeah. So we need to make him so that he targets. That's part of the problem, is having these different names. So like this bender is the one that we're animating in the timeline. Bender third person is probably the one that we want to target with him. We also need to figure out why he's not animating, so we'll select him. Target here, we're going to change from that bender to bender third person so that he's tracking after the moving bender. And now we just need to get him animating correctly. Part of the reason. So in his rigid body, his third person character, the ground check distance, this is the same thing we have to do on our third person animator. Just set this to 3 or 4 so that it knows that it's grounded and it will play the right animation. Because right now he was falling, so it looked like he was falling. It was playing his fall animation. Yeah, now he's walking towards us. Tries to adjust. Yep. Cool. All right, so now we've got, so you can tell where he's getting to us, but he's not stopping, he's pushing us. That won't really matter, but if you wanted to fix that, that's just in the navigation, the nav agent. So if we look at our agents, right now he's got a radius of 0.5, so we can just make it like, oh wait, no, sorry, it's in his AI. First, let's set it back to the zombie controller to see if those animations play. I will set my timeline to 50. It plays less. Start and see if the zombie animation plays. Yeah, see how it looks like he's floating, and that's because the zombie animation is so, I'm playing it so slow. He's also off the ground a little bit, but so let me select his character. That's in the Navmesh agent, the speed. So we can set this up to like 6. And the actually maybe it's 1. That's at full speed, I think. Let's see. Yeah, see how he's running. So he's got, I don't know what's going on there. There might be some collision thing on the nav mesh. Let's set his ground check distance to 4. Also, too, let's look at his collision, because that's what it's using for the check, is this collider. So set the radius a little bit wider, and we'll shift its position up. Now, why he gets goes cropping on the when he gets to the sidewalk, I don't know. Oh, you know what? It might be the step distance on our agent. Let's go like 2.5, 1. Let's leave it at that, and then do max slope. Let's go 2 on the drop height and 2 on the jump distance. That may create some traversal. Let's see what happens. I do like that it creates the height. Let's see. So there's something about him that's locked down. Now he's coming. So he couldn't see me across that gap. So once I get on the sidewalk, it's like I'm safe because he's trying to calculate. But as soon as I can navigate into his zone, so you can see that he doesn't see me across those gaps. All right, so these are bad. Maybe let's try making this, instead of just walkable, make it jump. And these generate off mesh links are these. So let's try baking that. Still taking a while. I'm guessing we're going to get more of these. There's our jump mesh though. So if we go and change our agent height to higher, does it change the jump? Nope. So if we go and change the step height to 2, see if that joins them together better. Yeah, so you can sort of see that there's combo. Let's see if he sees between the two. Yeah, okay, so he's coming towards me. You can see me on the sidewalk. And this is the other thing is in terms of the Navmesh, the speed. Some of these slower animations are going to cause issues. Okay, so he found his way across the mesh. It's actually not too bad in terms of the way he's behaving. He's floating a little bit, but yeah, that's pretty good. So so we have issues on these other sidewalks where it's not going to connect. We'll have to make those jumpable as well. So select those objects. It's a building. And then make these jump and bake. Sorry about that. So this is yeah, now we've got jumpable sidewalks everywhere. Let's see if he can go across them. It's a little slow. We'll have to fix that. Let me change that speed real quick. Let's go find him. So he's got the model that we're using has all of these parts, and we could basically delete those to create different versions of zombies. So if we turn off that, then you see his ribs coming through. So just something to think about. You can make take the same version, and once we get them behaving appropriately, you can go and duplicate them everywhere, and then go and delete some of these parts on each one to create different versions. All right, for his speed, we'll have, he's set for 0 friction. The nav, let's set him to like 0.8 or 9. Let's do 8 and see if he moves faster. Now he's running. For some reason when he runs, he automatically traverses back into that crouch. I don't know why. Let's try 0.7. It's a little slower that way. It's not the best zombie animation, but let's see if you can go over to the other. Yep. Can you go through here? Good. Oh, another thing. Notice how the camera disappears into the building? You may want that, you may not. One of the easiest ways to fix that is if you select that camera, our third-person camera. Wait, that's the Bender third person. Where's his? See him free look 1 right here. You can go down to the bottom, and then there's these extensions right here. You can add a Cinemachine collider and collide against, and basically we're going to get into this in a minute, but you want to be able to collide against, you could collide against everything. It's not recommended. We'll set that just to show you what it does. And avoid obstacles. Let's just see what that does. But basically that'll put a collider on the camera object so that when the camera goes to go through a building, it will slide up against the building instead of going through it. So you can't. You can see where there's a little bit of clipping on the side there, but the camera will behave the way it normally would until it gets into close quarters, like here. So the higher I go, now if I go and try to go through these walls, I can't. So to adjust that with the camera, and you can change the Cinemachine minimum distance from targets, avoid obstacles. Basically, you want to create just a little bit higher camera radius so that it won't get so close to the objects it's colliding with, and that'll keep it from clipping through like that. Smoothing time, you can make it bounce or ease a little bit, get a little dampening. Okay, let's see what happens there. So you see where it's like I'm going through the wall there, but I'm just bumping up against it, but I don't clip anymore through it. And if we do this, it follows. So it's a way of creating cameras that won't disappear behind walls and block your view. They do kind of bounce a little bit, so you have to be a little careful in the setting this stuff up, I think. Smoothing time. And we'll leave the damping closed off, but we'll keep the smoothing time. Let's see what happens there. So it may mean that it just collides and hangs back. So yeah, it's a little jerky, but not too bad. And it keeps you from being able to go through buildings, so the camera tracks better. All right, so now we've got our camera set up. We've got our zombie. Let's place a bunch of zombies in the scene now. So I'm probably going to put about 4 on each street. I don't need to worry about orienting them unless I'm showing them when they're not sensing the character. So if we go F to zoom in, I will duplicate. Well, I thought I would. Just lost my mouse. There we go. So I want to copy, paste, and call this zombie 2. Let's move them over. You just want to spread them out a little bit. What we may do is make a game group for this. So we'll put this guy down at the bottom of the scene so we keep them together. And do another. Now, as we go, we're going to go and delete some of these parts. Let's make that one 3. CV. Don't go too crazy with these because each one of them is going to be a drag on your machine processing in terms of animation, but also in terms of the AI calculating. But depending on the power of your machine, you can get away and do a lot. So let's open these and delete. Maybe one doesn't have a head. Or, wait, which one am I looking at? This guy. Let's get rid of right leg calf. Delete. I need a separate prefab because I can delete them otherwise. All right, I won't modify them in any way here, but the idea is, well, I suppose you could do that since you don't want to delete it, but you can hide it and select some other parts like that just to give them a little different. Maybe lose the head. I'm just deactivating those on these parts. I got a feeling though when I go to reactivate them, it's just going to show those parts again. Activate them in the timeline when we do the start game, end game thing. So here they come. They kind of converge. And you can see this in terms of, these are not a great option. Just doing it this way, creating like some random AI controller that just tracks after you like this, it's not super believable. And you may want to spread them out more. Whoops. Let me do I'm just going to move them down the street more. It's not going to be a horde. It's just going to be, that way they don't converge so quickly. Same thing over here. And then I'll take all of these and make a game object. Trying to figure out how to join them together so I can duplicate them easier and keep them intact. So I'm just going to create an empty. Let's see if this works. Call this zombie group 1. And put put them under it. See if that makes them perform still. All right, so yeah, they're all tracking towards me, and they're in that group. Okay, that's good. Then we will put we'll just, that way we can duplicate the group, copy, and then move it down here. Paste. Now we've got a second zombie group. 2. Then we'll move them this way. Probably gonna move them this way a little bit too. And we'll duplicate that one and put one over here as well. Copy. Make that 3. And do another. So by putting them in this group, if I deactivate the group, it deactivates them. That way I don't have to have as many activation tracks in the timeline. So it's kind of a way of grouping your code or your so what I've got here is where I'll put the, I'll have them stretched out like that. And then I can do one more. Paste, call that group 5. And we'll move it just so that some are in the alleys. That's good. All right, so now if we hit play, we've got 20 zombies in this place. And they're coming from that direction, that direction, that direction. See if there's a bunch coming around this corner. So you may think, oh, I can go over here. Oh, there's more coming that way. Now you let this bunch catch up to you, and then more coming around the corner that way. So you're faster than them. And so the idea then is to look around. We want to look around and be able to get to a place where they can't go. Maybe a end state. We'll add that over here. So they're still following us. They kind of know where we're going, so technically they should have a kind of AI on them. So we'll put a little trigger that will drop a ramp that will allow us to get up to the top of that building in order to complete the state. So so this is the building we want to get up to right here. So we'll add a trigger. Now the trigger could be anything. We're going to just make it a box. So 3D cube, bring it up. But this could be, you know, a rope hanging down or something to pull on that'll drop the thing. It could be a animated, like you can make a trigger that plays an animation or a timeline, a spinning wheel. In fact, we could do that. Actually, let's do that just to show you what I'm talking about. So we'll add another game object, 3D object, and I will add, trying to think if I have, no, I don't. I thought there might be a torus, but there's not. So we'll leave this cube for now. You could model, you could have like a turning wheel or something that you have to crank. And the idea being you just go up and hit an activation switch or whatever, and it causes it to crank, and that causes your thing to fall down into place. For now, we're just going to make it a cube that you run into. Let's hit F to zoom, center on it. So this will be our cube. And rather than put a big scaffold up, so well, we might do that too. So what we'll do is change your box collider, just change the size so that we make it just a little bit bigger and easier to collide with. So it's got this little projection out from it that's the trigger. Make it a trigger. The box collider is a trigger. And what that means is we'll be able to pass through this. So we don't technically even need this mesh renderer on it. It could just be a trigger that way. If you want to have the collision with the object as well, you can just copy that component and paste it again. And then turn off the trigger on one of them. So now we have a trigger and a collision, so that when we collide with it, it's fine. We're going to call this switch, just to keep it simple. That'll be our target for our collision. And then what we can do is we'll add another 3D object cube. This one, we're going to just make it flat and narrow. This will be our hinge, and then wherever we want to hinge from. And then we'll take and just copy that. Let's call this hinge. And then we'll copy that. And paste. And make this a child of hinge. I'm going to call this plank. And make it a child of hinge so that the hinge is its parent. We'll scale this a lot. We don't want this kind of want it to fall from there. We want it to fall on this, so we need to make it long enough. Yeah, maybe it falls into place that way. Let's just see if we rotate hinge. So we want it to fall to there. Take this, scale it like that. And where's our hinge? Yep. So yeah, that'll do. And then if we rotate it back into place, or just take the rotation that we put on it off. Whoops, that. This is on the Z, so minus Z. I'm changing the position. It's the rotation. 0. Okay. Yeah, that'll rotate into place. Now we're going to add another box. C, V. I'm going to take this out and put it on its own and call this walkway. Change its position to 90 degrees. And it's like we're going to be going up a fire escape. So just get this in the right position. CV, we'll copy that one. This will be our goal that we get to. Call in the helicopter or whatever. We'll change its name to goal switch, so it's easy to target. And I think that's good. Let's go and check it just to make sure we can do these, navigate these real quick. So go this way. There's the so now we're going up. Stay to that corner. So now once you're up here, collision on the camera is gonna mess with us a little bit. Go up. I should make guardrails so it's just easy to go up, but go across, get to there. And that'll be our target. Okay, so yep, good. Let's make it so we can animate that. We have to figure out. Yeah, and you could do in the game, you could make it so you go up one building and then have to drop something to get over to another building. Or climb up, go across something, you know, like make it more platformy. But for now, I'm just going to keep it this simple. All right, so let's rotate our hinge into position where we want to start. Actually, you know what? We can take the hinge and move it into position like there, and then grab the plank and move it back to here so that it kind of falls more from the fire escape. Like that. So take our hinge, which is in the right place now, rotate it, I think to 0. Pretty close. That gives us the ability then to move this to the right position and scale. All right, so there's our starting position. Now we need to make a timeline that makes it animate when we collide with this. So in order to do that, we can make, we could actually make a timeline on the hinge itself, which kind of makes sense. So let's do that. with the hinge selected, select timeline, and then it says begin new timeline with hinge, create a director component and a timeline asset. So let's go create. It's going to ask us where we want to save that. We're going to just save it loose in our assets. So we'll call this fire escape activate timeline so we know what it is. Save. Now we have our hinge actually in it and ready to be animated. So we don't have an animation that will make this thing do what we want it to do, but what we can do is record an animation. So if we hit record and then hit E and just rotate, that'll automatically insert, just even a slight rotation will insert a keyframe. Go back and set that to 0 so that we get a keyframe at the start, and then however long we want it to fall for. And these are like 30 frames, so let's do it over seconds. So if we want it to be, here's 1 second to, let's make it 2 seconds. And then rotate it down. Make sure it looks like it's colliding, yep. Okay. So now it's rotating down. And if we want, we can add the bounce. That's just like going and doing a slight rotation back up. Just grab this and then let it fall down to back into place. And you can do another one that's a little less up. Down. So I'm not being too careful in how I'm setting these keyframes, because the point is we can come back once we've got them set and add the bounce in the in this curve editor here. Now this isn't a great curve editor, but you can get it to go a little wider by doing this. And what we want is we can select these and make them linear. So what you want to do is both tangents, set them on, I've got selected all of the keyframes, set them to linear so everything goes linear. And then you can select this keyframe. Actually, you can select this one or all of these and say both tangents free. And that's going to give you these little handles. Let's do that instead of linear. Free on them. Free. So then if we select, whoops, this, we can grab this handle and basically make it kind of start to fall at an angle, and then this one we can ease. But we don't want it to ease. We want it to hit hard and then bounce back. So that means it's going to have this kind of bounce here, both tangents free, where it's going to do this and this. So this is our bounce back. And for some reason these aren't all set to, there it is. I'm just animating these. They're not all set free on all sides, so both tangents free. Then we get these. This is how you create those bounces, that same way you would in like Blender or something. So now if you look at, and these should decline over time, so if you go and you look at the keyframe, except I'm doing it in the wrong side, falls, bounces up, bounce, bounce, bounce. So you see, that's how you can create this kind of nice bouncing effect. But the main thing is to make sure that each one of these keyframes is at the position for that height. So I'm just zooming in, mouse wheeling to zoom in. And then just grab this and move it till it's in the right position. There. There. And I think this one's too high. Yep. So you get the idea. And then to shift them, to make it so that it's bounce and then decelerate over time, just make it squeeze these together quick. You know, they kind of, actually let's do them all. I don't know of a way to grab them here, but you can grab these, and if you go to shift and hold down shift, you just shift them on the time instead of shifting them up and down when you select them. Actually, just selecting them all will cause that. And you want them to just sort of fall into place quicker. Hold down shift. So the time that it takes for each bounce is also less. That's good. Okay, so there's our bounce. This one probably is decelerating a little bit, so we'll do that. All right, so there's our animated hinge. We just need to activate that timeline in order to make it work. So let's get out of the here, and we're on our hinge. So the hinge has the animator on it, and that's fine. We want it to be playable. But what we don't want is when we look at that hinge and you look at its playable director here, we don't want this play on wake to happen. We want to have to trigger that. So just uncheck that so that it stays in place. Everything else looks right. Wrap mode, we don't want it to loop, so we need to set that to none. And that's fine. And then it's going to have this animator, which is fine, which is those keyframes. Okay, so now we can drop that into place. We just need to make it so that it's triggered by this. So in order to do that, go back to project, and I think it's in scripts. I've added some scripts. This activate trigger playable right here. So select this guy, and drag that onto his components. So now, and with this activate trigger playable script on this box, we want to play this playable director, which right now is a list of 0. So set it to 1. And that'll create an element that we can target our playable director with, and we want to target hinge. So we're going to play the hinge playable director when we collide with this, but we need to say which object we want to collide with it. So the target will be I believe it's this box, which is switch, so we can drag that. And the source will be our bender. I've got all those base humanoid parts from the zombies in there. Just gotta get back to the bees. The question is which bender, so I think it's the second. Or wait, did I call him bender third person? I think I did. All right, we'll do that one just in case. And see what happens. All right, we've got that. Let's play it. We're going to run backwards. There's our trigger. If we collide with it, here comes our plank. Now we got to run back and then jump on it, and we can get up to the top. So that's how you create the kind of trigger timeline effect. Let me go back through that one more time just to show you. So it's using this. I'm going to include this in our on a GitHub script. So it's this activate trigger playable. It's added to a switch, a collider of some kind. That's got two colliders. One of them's a collider so that you don't go through the object. The other one is a trigger, and that's all it has to be. And then you create that switch, and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can trigger something, you can replace something, you can animate another type of animated track, not a playable, or you can play a playable director. And you can have as many playable directors as you want on it. You just have to create a certain number of them and then target the playable directors here. And whatever playable directors you target, it will animate when you collide with it. So then we can go up here, and now we can add our game menus and deactivation and activation scripts to make this work. So we're going to have, when we start this, even though I've turned it off here, we're starting with this timeline which introduces the game. Right now it's set to start at 50, but if we set it to start at 45, when we do that, it will start playing the timeline. We don't want to automatically come into the script. We want to have a start menu that starts the script anyway. And also activates all those zombies, because we don't want all the zombies chasing us down while we're waiting to start the game. So what we can do, we're gonna let me save this. Save project. Let's go ahead and make a menu from scratch just to show you how to do that. You're gonna make game object UI and just say text. That's going to automatically insert this canvas. We'll call this canvas. Every menu is a canvas. We'll call this start menu canvas, so we know what to target. Once we've got that selected, we can F in the window to zoom in on it and see what it is. And then from there we can add our text, which will just say start game. Or let's see, try to avoid the zombies while getting to the spaceship, since it's Bender. That'll be our instructions. Now that's just going to play, like if we look at our menu where that is, it's down here. See, it says try to avoid the zombies. What you can do is if you hit W, whoops, undo, select the text here, W, and then we can shift it up to be centered. Here's our center of our menu. So we can center it above the center of the menu, size-wise, and make sure that the text alignment's set for center in the field. Right now you can see that the field, it's getting cropped. So to make it bigger, just change the size to make it sort of minimum font size 24, And then we've got our wrap. It's all good. Best fits. Now, best fit makes it fit within that, but the scale may be a little small. Let's just see what happens when we start. I just want to see if it shows up and how it shows up in the menu. So there it is. There's the size. So it's getting scaled on our screen. That's because of the setup on the canvas, but also because of the physical size. So let's make it bigger. And we will make the rect form of this text in the canvas bigger in terms of its size. So we're going to make it 400 minimum, and then 300 height. Too much. 200. 100. There we go. So that gives us an idea on the scale. We'll just shift it up a little bit. Look at it when we play. See what it looks like. That's pretty good. Obviously, you could add more. You can dark it in and out or whatever. But for now, that's enough. And now we just need to add a button to this menu. So if we go select that, game object UI button. That'll add a button inside of that canvas. There it is. You can position it. And we'll just make, if you go inside of the button, text, make it say start game. And there's that. Now this button has a script associated with it that will do things. For one thing, on the button, you can give it a normal color, so you can colorize it to make it so the start can be kind of this lime green. And then if you have a highlighted color when you roll over it, maybe make it orange. Pressed color could be a darker orange. And won't be really a selected color because it's not going to be an on-screen menu that needs to know when it's been selected. So we'll leave that, but we'll make it red, whatever. Then there's a disable, but it won't be disabled because it's going to just be the start screen. So now with that, down at the bottom below that button script, there's an empty list for on-click. Just make it click this little plus icon, select the object that you want to target, select scene, and in this case I think it's going to be hinge, because we're targeting, sorry. We don't have a playable timeline. Actually, in this case, instead of hinge, it's going to be that timeline that we want to start playing. Timeline. We're just going to activate that. Although that timeline is going to be playing, if we activate that, then we don't have any control over all of our zombies. So rather than that, we need to make a new game object, create an empty, call this start game timeline. Okay, that's going to be the thing that we want to activate, and that's going to be a timeline that turns on all of our, or activates all of our things that we need to start the game, including that initial timeline. So what we do is with that, go back to our button, not that far into it, that one, and instead of that, we're going to do start game timeline right there. And then for the function, it'll be or wait, would it be, it might be set active, I believe. game object, set active Boolean. So it'll be, in this case, we will activate it. So we're going to have that game timeline object turned off. So when you click start, it'll turn on that timeline and that'll start everything rolling. Okay. Let's see. So let's go and make that timeline that turns on everything. So start game timeline right here. So right now that timeline is nothing. So let's make a new timeline for that. Start game timeline playable. That's fine. We'll put it in our assets. Yeah, loosen the assets folder. Here's our timeline. And what we want to do is make it activate a bunch of stuff. So the thing that we want to activate first will probably be our timeline, that initial cutscene. So add an activation track for that, which means that that will be deactivated in the beginning. So we turn that off. Now I'll go back to our start game timeline. So with that deactivated, we probably want to have like a start camera. I'm trying to think of where to put that. Otherwise, we're going to have a default camera view that's going to show something else. So since we're not covering up everything with the menu, let's do our default camera. We're just going to place like a virtual camera in the scene, maybe something like this. Will be fine. And then when we start the timeline, the camera will zoom, transition from that default to, I think, our start position here. Maybe we go lower like this, something like that. We're going to deactivate those zombies too, so don't worry about that. So then we'll add a camera, go to Cinemachine. So I got into position here. I basically got into a certain view that I wanted for the start. Now if I go to Cinemachine, create virtual camera, it's going to create the CMV Cam 1, and we'll call this Start Cam. And then if I go out, there's the camera right there. Yep, that's good. That'll be our start camera. So what we do is in our start game timeline, start game timeline, drag that in, actually add a Cinemachine. So right click over here in the timeline, Cinemachine track. That's going to control our main camera. Always in the Cinemachine timelines, the target in these Cinemachine tracks is the main camera. And then you add a Cinemachine shot here, and that will be our start camera right there. So it's active for this timeline. And that's going to run at the very beginning of the script because there are no other timelines like we haven't activated. So timeline is, this is the start game. Actually, sorry. This screen, the start game timeline, will actually not be this camera. It's going to be the free cam, or the, no, it won't be anything because we're going to just activate that timeline and that's going to start the playback. So sorry. Lose this. My bad. This camera will be the active camera because everything else should be turned off. If not, we will put a start timeline that will be the first thing that plays and activates it. Bear with me a sec because there's a lot of juggling going on here. So this will be the start. Let's just see. because I've got the timeline deactivated. I just want to make sure. So yeah, it's still starting that timeline because the timeline its initial time there, game time, play on wake. That's part of it. Is the so yeah, actually, we want this time to be the timeline to be activated. Turn off the play on wake so that the start doesn't start playing that. And then in our menu, our button, let's just make sure it's not going to be setting it to active. It will be Playable Director. Bear with me. Playable asset. And notice that adds another checkbox here, and it's set for the start game timeline. The playable asset will be start game. And that's this this timeline, start game timeline. Yep, that's the one that we have to start. Sorry, that's where some of these names get ridiculous in terms of the when you create them by doing this create option, because it puts timeline on everything. Start game, it was the one I had from the other script. Sorry, they're starting to loop because I've had this in another scene. So what we want is this one, start game timeline, and that's where you need to be descriptive if you have multiple scenes, because these names can start to overlap if you use the same target each time. Okay, so there's that. That start game timeline is this. That will activate the timeline. And actually then in that case we do make it so that the timeline is not active and it does play on wake. So I believe then, let's just take a look. Still doing that timeline. Playable mode. So that timeline is Bender cutscene timeline asset. I think that might be the one that I need to activate. Or yeah, I need this to be set. This needs to be deactivated. Yeah, see how it's got, it's not activated. And then start game timeline will be activated. Does play on wake. Oh, does not play on wake. Actually, that's the reason. It's it's hitting this timeline because we don't want it to. We want this thing to be played when we click on the button. So now let's try it. Sorry about that. It gets convoluted. So now notice that we've just got some who knows what kind of camera, and the zombies are still doing their thing because they haven't been deactivated, but that timeline with Bender walking is not playing. So if we hit start, then that does start the timeline. So that's working. When you're gonna, okay, good. Okay, so now here's the deal. Our cameras are colliding. We've got so many. So we need to set a first camera to play, or priority for our first camera. So basically that'll probably mean this, or we could, if we have all these other cameras active, we could deactivate them and then activate them in the start. That's probably the better idea. So like all these other virtual cameras can be deactivated at the start and have this one so that there's no other choice but to use this. When we play the start game timeline, we can just activate all those. So what I'm going to do is put all of those in a dummy object that I can turn off. So it'll be, let's add a component, create empty, call these camera group. And basically I'm going to take all of the cameras, CM side cam, CM free look, end of street cam, and end of street cam 2. Let me make sure I'm getting them all selected. Everything but the start cam. And pull them all down into the camera group. So if I turn that, look at it. Looks like they're all selected. If I turn that, deactivate, nothing is left but this camera. So notice how it became active when I deactivated them. Which means then in my start game timeline, I want to make an activation track for those and turn them on so that when I start the game they all become active by starting this timeline. And I can basically just do a little bit of a fudge by pulling this out a notch. Let me zoom in. You want this to be kind of a sequential order of events, so you just want to skip a frame. So activate the camera groups so that they're there, and then activate the timeline so that the cameras are set up, because if you do them simultaneously, you may cause a problem. And in terms of one frame, you're not going to notice the difference. So there's that. So I activate that timeline. I'm also probably going to want to do the zombie groups. They won't get activated until the end of the game timeline, so or this timeline. So what I can do is, so I activate this. Let me just go ahead and crop these both here. It doesn't need to be long. Just editing, trim to end, editing, trim to end, so that they're short. It just needs to go through and do its thing and then get out of the timeline. So for 5 seconds this will play. It'll line up, and then so there'll be a little bit of a pause. You could go closer if you wanted. So the timeline, the camera group. Let's see how it plays now. Should mean that the start cam is the only cam. There we go. See, our zombies are moving, so we need to deactivate those. When we hit start game, it starts, it zooms to that camera because we've started the timeline. So now we can set the timeline here to start at 0. So it does its initial thing. Let's just make sure. So start game. So there's our start with Bender walking around the corner. We're also going to get rid of this in a second. So let's deactivate the zombies. At start, so they are right here, all of these guys. Turn them off. They're all turned off, which means they won't be activated until we put them an activation in. So now they're gone. Then we start our script. Now we need to turn this menu off. So that'll be in our start game timeline here. We just need to take our start menu canvas and add activation track, and then just turn it off after a frame. And that'll be in the editing, trim to end. So that'll deactivate that menu once we've clicked. So there we go. Start game. Menu's gone. Player timeline. So you can see how once we finally get the order of events going, it goes pretty quick in terms of setting up. So now we've got this huge long intro. I'll stop it. I want to get to the end of the timeline here and just add some animation clips or activation tracks for all of these zombies groups at the end of that. Or I could do the activation track in another timeline and just add the timeline and activate them all that way. It's half a dozen, one or another. So I'm going to, just to make it easier, I'll just drag them here, add activation track, same activation track, activation, and it's getting harder because it's a lot more stuff. But putting them in groups helps to keep it kind of organized. Now we're just going to make those pretty short. Select them all, editing, trim ends, or O perhaps. Let's see if that works. Nope, have to do it individually. Why aren't they? Let me make sure. Well, alternatively, you can select them all, perhaps, and then just trim them short this way. Nope, one at a time then. And the point is, we only want them to be at the very end of this. Move them all to the very end of the timeline so that they're the last thing and they're active when we get into that free look. So we can go and trim. Doesn't take much. You don't want them to go too soon. So now those will only be active at the end of that timeline, which doesn't activate until we've started the menu. Okay, let's try. This is going to take a I should probably set the timeline to start just to double check. I'm going to make it so that this thing again doesn't start until like 45. Okay, so nothing's playing. Give her instructions. Start the game. Start at that point. Still no zombies. Now, there are the zombies. They're coming towards us. We've got to go find our thing. And we still don't have the collision where he'll die with them. But I just wanted to make sure we haven't broke anything else accidentally. Did that activate? There we go. And then you can jump up on top. Whoops. What just happened? Looked like it activated and deactivated. They're colliding with it. So there's an issue. Why? I'm not sure. Let's check. In this, it's colliding with that activate trigger. Oh, the repeat trigger's on by default. So you just want it to trigger once. You don't want that repeat trigger. And that should work. The other thing is you don't want the zombies colliding with it because they actually may. And I'll show you how to create collision layers so that only the things you want to be able to collide can collide. It also optimizes the collision calculations. So one activation, boom, then jump. Still, there we go. So then you can get up to there. All right. Now to make it so that the zombies don't collide with it, we need to create some layers up here in our layer menu. Right now we have enemy, player, level, post-processing, a couple of others. We can add, actually, yeah, this is the layering we want because I've added this in the other channel, in the other scene. So basically, if this switch, right now it's set to default. If we look at edit, project settings, physics, down here in the bottom of physics, and this is for this project, you get this layer collision matrix. And you don't want enemy to be able to collide. You want them to be able to collide with the player, but you don't want them to be able to collide with and other enemies too. But you don't want them to be able to collide with certain objects like these switches, which means that right now I've got it turned off for level. So we can place that switch right here. We can place that in the level layer. And then now, if a zombie just inadvertently walks up against this, it won't automatically trigger that switch by putting it in that level. And that's how you kind of, and I'll show you this in the next video. It goes into a lot more detail because there's a lot more layers to control for the 3D tutorial. But just remember that you can, if you're having issues with your AI activating switches, you set up this sort of level system for switching and make it so that they can't collide with switch objects, and put those switch objects in that level so that they can't collide with them. All right, so the last thing we need to do, last two things, is set up our end game state, which can either be death when a zombie collides with us, or winning when we get to this switch. I probably won't add the winning switch because you've already seen how I can do it here and activate a timeline, but I will add the death for the collision because that gets a little bit tricky. So let's let me think about this a sec. We need to add, in fact, I may just go and copy the character. Let me save everything that we have it right now. Save, and then save project, and then go explain it in our simpler scene because we're getting kind of complicated here. So let's go to project and assets, scenes, and then I'm going to go back into this sample scene and look at what we have at the start, which is everything turned off. But if we turn on our Bender model and we turn on Bender dead, you see that we've got, like, this is our third-person controlled character, which we're actually activating at the end of that initial timeline where he's walking down the street, and when the bus goes by, then we turn this on. This has a relationship to the Bender dead, and that the Bender dead, he's deactivated. He's normally deactivated, but he's got this, accidentally opened him. He's got this position constraint, which is targeted to this guy's transform, and just will keep him there kind of at his feet, or we'll put him at his feet when it finally gets activated. So, and then play his animation using the death timeline, this death animation. So if we, oh, that's deactivated. Nope. Yeah, there it is. So this death animation has a bunch of things to it where it's like he's active, and then it just swaps models with these activation tracks and kills him. Now the main camera is the Cinemachine camera. It just keeps the same camera that was on the original. Just I want to set that so that it still hovers around his dead body. And then at the end of it, we play this game over menu. Okay. So what we probably want to do, just to make it easy on ourselves, and the important thing here is that it doesn't matter where this dead bender object is, because it's this constraint that's on him will cause it to snap to this guy and activate the animation when it's done. So really what we can do is we can copy bender dead, death animation, and I believe the game over menu. Copy all three of those and paste them into our scene, and it'll save us some work since I've already done this once. So I'm going to copy, go back to our project, go to game prototype. Don't save the modifications to that. And then I'll paste these. So there's our death animation, which is a timeline. You can see our bender model here, bender dead, floating right there. Again, doesn't really matter where he's at because he's going to target. Notice I'm missing a transform because I put him in a different scene. I want him to target the transform for bender third person here. This armature, since the armature has a different name, if I rename this, it's going to mess up the animation and stuff, but I do want to be able to target it just to make it easy. So I'm going to make it armature 1 real quick. That will make it so that he doesn't do what he needs to do, but it will allow me to connect bender dead's position constraint to armature 1 right there. Notice how he snaps. Now I can go and change that. Sorry, this guy's armature 1 back to armature, so it works. And then his position dead just kept that link, so he's in the right place. I can deactivate him. The death animation timeline, get to, which is here. And now I've got some broken game objects, so I want to deactivate this, or have first the active third-person character right here. Gotta find him. It's called bender third person, I believe. Bender third person there. He'll be active, but in this case, because I'm just jumping from one timeline to his timeline, he'll be active wherever I've jumped from. This isn't going to like reposition him there. It's going to keep him wherever. He'll be active, and then he'll automatically transition to this guy and fall dead. Okay, but wherever he was at. The camera that I want to target is the main camera, obviously, because that's the way it always is. But then I lost my virtual camera too. I need the CM free look one, I believe. Yep, that one. Notice that it's in place. And then my game over menu is my game over menu here, so I activate that. Let me just double check that to make sure. If I select it and activate it and hit F, I can zoom in. It says game over. There's my start, play again. And I think that should work because the script, again, that button script on the game over is kind of a universal script, and that it will just play whatever the current, restart the current scene with this restart game script, which I'll include in the comments. All right, I think that should be it. Let's check. Oh, I don't have the colliders on the zombies yet, but that'll be our next, because all we'll have to do then is like start that death animation. So if we run into him, nothing happens because we need a trigger. Hit F. We need to add another capsule collider here. Copy component. Paste component is new. Whoops, I added it to the bottom. Added to remove. Make this a trigger. And let's turn them on so I can make it a little bit wider on the radius. Just make it bigger, kind of fatter. So that means that when a zombie collides with that, it'll trigger his death animation. And then, so there's that. I just need to add that trigger script to the zombies. So what we'll do is we'll do it to 1 and make sure it works. So he's got the capsule collider. We need to zombies are turned off. Turn on group 1. Select this guy since he's closest. And add my scripts. Activate trigger script to him. Let me do it again. I didn't get it on there. Here, I'll add it this way. It'll be under scripts. Or not. Not sure why he's not taking the scripts. Let's see. He's got his capsule collider. They do seem to be missing the there it is. Scripts. Smooth follow. Nope. Trigger enter maybe. It's not it though. Because that's trigger enter. Not sure why this is not. There it is. I got him on him. I just drug it onto the character in the scene. So we wanted to do is play. Target will be I think I'm trying to remember which way this goes. Bender. Third person. Let's do it this way. Bender. Third person. Since he's the one that's got the trigger. And then the source will be the zombie. Let's drag this guy's character. And trigger counts 1, playable director size is needs to be 1. And then you're going to target the death animation. And that should work. All right, so he'll be the guy. He's the one with the full body, just to remember which one we're colliding with. Let's turn him off, or turn off the group. And we'll try it. And if that works, then we will, so here's Bender. Now, whoops, what just happened? Oh, I added the bigger collision on him, on the third person. That I may have made the wrong capsule collider. Collision and trigger. So this one, it's hard to tell which one's which. So turn them off. So actually this one is not trigger. This one is the collision, because this one was too big, sorry. So let's move that one up in front. The first collider, it doesn't matter the order, but this is the bigger one. So we'll just make the big one, make sure that's the trigger. So the one that's visible, or the brighter one, that's the trigger. And then this one, let me turn off this one and make sure. So this one is not the trigger, this smaller one. Basically, because this thing was bigger and it got sunk down into the ground, it just couldn't collide. We'll try again. So now there's our guy. Let's run towards Mr. Full Body. And he's colliding, but he's not activating. I think, let me check our death script. Death animation. It's alive. Playable director, death timeline, wrap mode, play on wake. So the zombie, it's probably in the targeting here. Let me save and just double check my zombies in the other one to see the proper order. Go back to projects, scenes, sample scene. Let's turn on one of our zombies, this guy. It's Bender is the target, and AI third person controller. And then let's check. Here's the source, which is the name of this guy. Bender's the target, play, and then that's the death animation. It may be that I targeted the wrong Bender. Let's check. Go back to game prototype. And zombie group 1. Zombie 1. Bender. Third person. Let me make sure that's the one I want to target. Perspen. Let's change that name. So, Bender third person. And check my zombie. this guy. Yeah, he's targeting that guy, and I wonder if I can just make it a zombie group in terms of the source. I don't even know if it matters, but he's the guy, zombie. You know what? He may not have a collidable object. Let's check. Capsule collider. Yeah, he does. Collision detection is discrete. Play third person. Oh, yeah, Bender third person. And zombie 1, trigger count. And death animation is the playable director. Let me just check. Notice that there's a jump. You can see the body there snapping when we activate. It's probably because there's some overlap. And then game over menu. Let me just double check. Trying to figure out if there's a reason why this would not play. Because I'm activating the dead with the death animation right here. Snap it, he dies and falls. See if this is targeting what I think it is, that guy. So I'm thinking that the zombie's the problem. Let's see. He's colliding. You know what? He may not be colliding. The mesh, that may be the problem. So because we've got a width on them and the collision, they may not be able to get close enough. Let's do this. Let's make the trigger bigger and just see. So for the trigger, oh, you know what? I turned it off. So it was deactivated. The trigger was. That's why it wasn't. Let's try it now. Sorry. I had accidentally turned it off when I was checking. So it wasn't triggering just because the trigger was turned off even when I turned him on. All right, now hopefully this will play the dead animation. Boom, dead. Game over. Play again. Start game. Starts back. Oh, and he falls through the ground. Why does he fall to the ground there? I think maybe I should take this third person and just move him up a little bit. And then deactivate him. Let's double check. You're going to run into things like this where it's just little physics weirdness, or could even be the collision of the I saw this issue in one of the previous videos where this collision for the detection of this effect, it looks like it worked the second time, just raising them off the ground, caused a collision error. So in other words, setting up this volumetric effect for the collision box. Let's just make sure it keeps working. Yep, yeah, dropping them onto the ground works. It's just not too noticeable. All right, so now dies again, boom, dead. So if you wanted, you could bring up that quicker, you could play a sound, whatever, in that timeline. So now in order to propagate that effect, you just take zombie 1, copy this playable here, copy components, and just paste it as new onto these others, and it should come in. It'll take the settings. Paste as new, and paste as new. Now those 4 are activated. Let's just double check and make sure. We'll go to the farthest one and make sure he's set up. You'll end up doing lots of play testing of your game this way. So this guy, death, play again, start game, good to go. Okay, so now you can go through all of these different zombie groups. Basically just remember to paste this trigger component on all of those. It's a pain in the butt. It's not the most optimal way to do this for sure. Like you should, if you were going to do this in a real game, you'd have a you'd have a manager for these. You wouldn't be running all these versions of a script for trigger activate. It's just super inefficient. But if you're not a scripter or a programmer, this is a good way to get a prototype started and kind of figure it out, and then hopefully you get into the scripting otherwise. So I want to try something. I want to see if I can take and paste this component onto here. I'm going to deactivate it on these zombies. There might be an optimization here where we can have less. I'm just going to remove it from that first one. The fact that I've removed it from the first zombie in the group, the one that's whole, and I pasted it onto the zombie group itself. I just want to see if that still triggers. Having that script running, it may just be listening for those events. And by pasting it on the group and running the script from there. Nope. See, it's not on that guy, but it is on that guy. So can't do it on the group. All right, good to know. Come back, paste it here, remove it from the group. All right, where was I? I pasted it there. There. I think I was on 4. Yep. So yeah, this is hardly optimal in terms of setting it up. It runs, at least on my machine, but I have a pretty heavy-duty machine. It runs okay. Like I said, this is mainly for prototype purposes and being able to knock something out quickly, getting that basic idea of the game across. Once you actually, get the job to make the game, you can go back and do all the optimization. And like I said, in that case, and in the next video, I'll show you some ways of setting it up so that it actually works better, where you create a entity component system and you have some communication and events triggered instead of having to paste scripts on all of your enemies. And it just works better, more efficiently, I should say. All right, so now we have death on all the zombies. Yep. And we can go back to our timeline and reset the time to start as 1, or at 0, I mean, so that when we play, we've got our camera, cuts to our trigger. He's animating, going down the scene. I kind of like that walk for him. And that was in, I think, the 3rd group of the huge mocap set, which also, for some reason, has disappeared from the Blender Asset Store. And if you Google search it, I think you can find it that way. If not, it's the mocap library, which is open source from, it's listed in the set. Let's go. I just want to double check. We'll go and collide with, I think group 4 was down here. The mocap set comes from, let's see, does he die? Yep. Okay, game over, play again, and then it starts through that whole cutscene again, which is obnoxious. You could do a script to check on the playback of this, and then on that gameplay not execute this cutscene if it's already been executed once. It's your call. But for the purposes of making a prototype, this is fine. Like I said, you could go and add another timeline effect, or add another playable for colliding with this object. Once you get there, that would have like a helicopter come and save him, or a spaceship, or whatever. But like I said, this is the general idea of setting up a condition, having some enemies, getting to a state where you have to basically unlock some sort of puzzle, in this case to get this to fall one time and one time only, and then find your way up to a point to keep going, have some menus to restart, stuff like that. It's a basic game prototype. If you have any questions about this or any comments about better ways to do it, leave them in the comments, and I'll include the scripts and stuff. In the next video, I'm going to go over doing this basically the same concept using some other assets from the Unity Asset Store that have some better quality AI and some ability to fight back and things, triggering events and stuff. But we'll just go over that and show it rather than trying to rebuild it in this. So hopefully you liked the video. Thanks for watching.